Good day. Welcome to the wrong show. Episode 12? I think it's 12. Maybe 13. Not sure. Haven't been doing the follow up. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Michael. Hold one sec.
Okay.
While I pin you. Now that's weird. Oh, I know. Wait a sec. I turned the auto lock off on this whole.
Okay. Those are
There we go.
those are good guys. So I just booted up. We were mining the last time we spoke.
Let me pull a shake it down just a little bit here.
Okay. And let me.
Okay. So
Okay. So I now have a view for you and a view for me, and we can see the game. Okay.
and lots of debris.
Yes.
Um, just so you know, I realized that I need to be on a relatively strict eating schedule so that it doesn't interfere with my medications. And so, and when we do this, I miss a meal. So sitting next to me is that meal all ready to go, and Alexa will tell me in about an hour that I have to eat. So
Okay.
I'll still be here. I'll just be sitting here eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Wonderful. Okay. Sounds
So
perfect.
hello.
How's it going?
Um, well, the truth is, they haven't really made any progress in finding anything that helps with the pain issues I'm having, and the combination of being all by
Wait, all by what?
that was a reminder about you,
Oh,
and and in a very high level of pain all day is um, sort of a dark night of the soul.
yeah. I'm
Um,
so sorry. It sucks.
I know, and but it's the way it is right now. So they're continuing to try. I become increasingly sus, skeptical that they're going to find much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they may move me on to different painkillers that are um, um, interesting. They're opiates, although they're not any of the hydrocodone, oxycodone.
They're not in that family.
It's a long story. They're only available for people with severe chronic pain, and oddly enough, are easier to prescribe than hydrocodone.
Huh.
In that you don't hydrocodone, you have to have a hard copy of the prescription. These apparently can be called into the pharmacist, and I do have one pharmacist who will deliver controlled substances. And I actually did manage to get enough information out of my insurance company to discover that it was covered, and it didn't need prior approval. And but figuring out how much it's going to cost will it'll start at $300 a month, and where it will go from there is I'll only find out as it goes on. It will
Oh my
probably go
gosh.
down,
Okay. Hopefully.
um, but I can do that if I have to. So
Okay.
and first I have to wean myself off of what I'm already doing, part of what I'm already doing. So
Right.
at any rate, it's a hard time for me.
Yeah. Trying to
And
get those drugs are so difficult. I was on one of the codones for a while, and getting off of it, took time. It was really a major ordeal. Um,
Yeah, they have lots, and then there's constipation problems, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the reasons I have to be careful about eating. Is that I get enough of the right food in me to at the right intervals so that I don't. Um, but, but it's there. There's no solution at the moment other than just doing what I'm doing. Um, I'm, I'm I and This is one of the things that I most look forward to during the week.
Yeah. Thanks. That's good. So what we
Um,
just found is an asteroid with void opals, which is a particularly
void void opals.
yeah, void opals. So at least let me check. Yes, core detected void opal. So we're gonna crack this sucker and get to see the explosion. We got seismic charges in our abrasion blaster. Oh, and look, somebody's getting attacked over there. I wonder who that is. It is a criminal, and the cops are after him right now. And it doesn't look
So
like
I,
he's.
I've seen a few more episodes of The Expanse.
Oh, okay.
I am up to the point where I still struggle. I started to say a little, considerably with the names of people and the ships and such. But is Naomi the woman with corded hair who is the mother of the boy who has become like lieutenant to Marcus?
Yes, and I call that like the curly mohawk, but yeah, that's
Oh, okay,
Naomi.
okay. I'm up to the episode in which Marcus asked the fat stocky guy who sort of turned to kill her, and
Right,
he said, "If you want it done, do it yourself." And the kid intervened on his mother's behalf, and Marcus said something about my son has a kind heart, and he didn't mean it as a compliment.
right.
Uh, and I will say, Marcus's like speech to Earth that he had half destroyed was pretty convincing.
Yeah,
Um, it made me think, I can see how Hitler's happened.
yeah, yeah. He was. I mean, we really hate him, and that's like a compliment because he's a good villain. You know.
And he did make it sound like he was, that he was on the side of good.
Yeah, yeah. He made it sound like he was justified in that mass murder.
And if I understand correctly, there was a third hit on Earth.
I think so. I actually lose count. But yes, it does look like there were three, although he had planned originally nine, but they caught the
Right.
rest
And
of
you
them.
told me two of them hit, and then it appeared
A third one hit,
the,
yeah.
that third one hit, and the woman with a voice like Suzanne Bluchette is like, I guess now sort of like second in command to the guy who was left over to now head of the UN.
Right. And he's what we call, he's like he was what, an education secretary or something, or
Oh,
transportation, or. But anyway, the point is that we don't know what kind of character he's going to become and what power is going to do to him. Um, so we're very interested to see what happens. But we know that whatever happens, it's going to cause problems for Aversorella, right? So
right. Well,
be,
it better, or there wouldn't be a show.
that's right.
Uh, one of my fonder memories of high school was the first day. It was the first day of modern European history, and the teacher, who was Mr. Brown, said, "Does anyone know Lord Acton's quote about power?" And we all just sat there, and because I didn't recognize it, and he said, come on, the one about power and corruption." I went, "Oh!" I raised my hand, and I said, "Is that us mining, or is that something being blown?"
That's us. We just blew up that asteroid. It's one of the
Oh,
more
okay,
cool, dramatic elements of the game.
looks nice. At any rate, I said, "Oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely." And he paused and he said, "Well, you just blew my my first day speech to my modern European history classes because you got the quote right. Everyone says, everyone says power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Nobody ever says tends to corrupt, which is the correct thing. And my speech was about uh, how how history gets corrupted by being by being communicated incorrectly over and over and over until it doesn't recognize it. It bears no relation to what actually happened.
Right. You know, that was a good teacher.
He was.
That's
He used
actually
to. He used to specifically, if I was out sick one for a day, he would schedule a pop quiz for the day I came back, so that I wouldn't have time to study for it.
I'm
And
gonna get.
when I said something about it, he would just like give me an evil grin.
I had a teacher in high school, Father. Oh, I think his name was Brennan, and the way the curriculum worked, we would all be assigned, like most of the school would be assigned the same book to read, right? And in this particular case, it was the Caine Mutiny. We had to read the Caine Mutiny, and so Father Brennan never assigned it. He just never brought it up. He didn't say anything until one day he announces that we're going to have our test tomorrow on the Caine Mutiny. And I raised my hand and I said, Father, you never actually assigned that to us. That was never anywhere in the assignments. And he said, did you hope that you wouldn't have to read it? And so I had to read the Caine Mutiny in one night. So,
And probably did.
and I did, yes, I did. But I just thought, at that moment, he looked at me and he was sort of like, Alcock, I got you. Did you hope that you wouldn't have to?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I did. um,
And the ship that what's the main sort of like good guy on the show on the
Holden,
that
and the Rocinante.
and the Rosamond, and that was the one they ran up against a couple of ships that looked like Martian warships, and I wasn't clear whether Marcus now controlled all the Martian warships or whether disguised some of his own ships to look like Martian warships, and they barely got away into warp space and pulled some fancy maneuver where one of them had to like do something outside the ship and like barely got back inside and survived.
Yeah, and so Marcos has this what he calls the Belter Navy, and it is made up of about 4 Martian warships, and the rest are Belter ships. And the way you can tell the difference is Belter ships look like a bunch of trash cans attached to each other,
Okay.
and Martian ships tend to have these um, uh, polygon sort of shapes, right? They tend to have
Okay.
like polygons put together kind of shapes. That's what I and
Okay.
the one they beat was just a regular Belter ship that was attacking them. Although it might be because actually I can't remember all the battles. Never mind, it could have been either.
No, the one that I saw last night, which is still this season, and I'm still behind. He's what he. Wait a minute, those are not Belter ships. Those are Martian warships.
Got it.
We got to get out of here.
Right,
And
right.
they went into some version of warp speed where it looked like it was their innards were being dissolved, and they were being followed anyway.
That was the Razorback, and it was the Cowboy and Bobby Draper, the Martian Marine.
Okay.
They were desperately trying to maintain distance so that so that they wouldn't get killed. And in the end, the cowboy had to basically release the equivalent of his warp core, right? Like basically a mass of his the ship's drive energy, in order to convince the nuke that was following them to blow up behind them rather than on them. And then they shut down everything and just sort of drifted in the blast wave of the nuke that had exploded behind them, hoping that the ship that was following them and firing on them would be convinced that they were dead, which is what they thought. Very submarine warfare style. Just a lot of the scenes that involve that kind of action tend to be straight out of Das Boot. And then they just sort of, let's see what we got here. Sorry, we got a lot of people flying around us, and I just want to see if some of them are pirates. This guy is a pirate.
You tourist?
He's a pirate, so we're gonna kill him.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Next line. There was when I worked for the New York City Ballet, one of the principal female dancers was German. Her name was Allegra Kent, and she was very large for a ballerina. Both she was taller, and as a result, heavier. Since they have to be regularly picked up by male dancers, most female dancers are classical dancers are like 100 pounds is a lot, and
right.
Allegra was quite a bit big, and she had big feet, and somebody hung up in the middle of the dressing room one of her pink toe shoes when that movie was out, and then labeled it Das Boot.
Yes, I can imagine the male dancers are like, okay, all right, I can do this.
Yeah, because those extra 20 or 30 pounds over the course of a long ballet is a lot.
Yeah, and then you have to make them look like they're floating or flying, or
and you have to have to make the whole thing look effortless. Right. I actually once heard George Balanchine in a rehearsal hall when a dancer, a female dancer, was doing what's called a grand jeté. It's one of those big leaps, that they do forward. And in the middle of it, as she was sort of like reaching, the apogee of her arc, he said, "Stay up." And I swear to God, it seems like she got an extra half a second up there.
Yeah. That is amazing. That's fun.
And he just said it like, he was saying turn left.
Yeah.
Stay up.
Stay up. That's funny. So the reason why we can't see all the debris around us is because in order to collect the goods from the asteroid we blew up, we had to fly into the dust cloud that we created.
Okay, so we're in the dust cloud.
We're in the dust cloud. So, and now somebody thinks that they can pirate us. So there's a lot of pirate activity today. Let's see what we got here. That's not the pirate.
Maybe you're developing a reputation.
Here he is. That's the pirate. And he's already opened fire. How nice of him. Just to open fire and not even make demands for goodies. Let's make sure. Yeah, he's definitely a pirate. So it looks like the cops are already helping us, which is nice. And he is going to die now. Bye-bye. Okay, so we're going to move out of this cloud, and we're going to shift from weapons to looking for our pulse waves so that we can start looking for more goodies. And we have to lower our landing gear. Now we can see the stars again.
Yeah.
Okay. So I talked to my sometime chief operating officer this morning for Proxima Flux, and I shared with her the idea that that instead of just building until we have the full enterprise product, the one that actually facilitates dialogue across 1,000 people, that we really could have the first product be what I described to you the other day in our last episode, which is you just invite Corvox to the meeting because you know that feedback about the quality of the dialogue, without the Corvox actually understanding the dialogue, but just the totem, right, of I'm hearing good word, good language, poor
Right.
language, that kind of thing. That's a product in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because you could be running a meeting and saying, we've invited an AI to analyze our ability to conduct productive meetings. That's it. And there's not going to be a score. Nobody's going to be graded. There's nothing will turn into a report to our bosses. It's just a helpful
Will it be a
feedback.
final test?
Yeah, right. Not on a permanent record.
Will this be on, will this be on the test, sir?
Did you hope it wouldn't be?
Yeah.
He was he was a tough professor, teacher, but
Oh, all the best teachers are the ones that drive you crazy.
yeah,
Yeah. Because they expect more. They expect more from you.
you know,
Zeb to me is very much that in terms of the work that we do, is he's just never satisfied. It doesn't matter what insight I have or what I achieve. He always celebrates it with me and is genuinely happy. But half a session later, he's moved on to something that is yet to be accomplished.
right, right. He doesn't stay put and just rest on it.
And
Yeah.
and that's what he's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sometimes it doesn't make me like it any better, but I keep showing up. So
Something's right.
and I mean you and I would never have happened. I would just not have been open to something that seemed so like just outside my understanding at a time when I'm so uncomfortable
Right.
and the idea of just saying yes to something and finding out what it is as you're doing it was really a sea change for me.
Well, I can't tell you. I was so happy. I was like, I suggested it, and I was like, I don't know what he's gonna say, but I was like, oh, he said yes. All right, let's do this. Let's make it.
And the few people I know who know enough about AI more than me that I can clumsily sort of give some idea of of what you're and where you what you're well if I this morning I was talking to a friend, and I know this isn't exactly correct, but I thought with her it would tell her what she needed to know. I said he wants to help an AI evolve which can comprehend the human heart, not just the human head.
Nice. Yeah.
And I thought that, I know that's not exactly right.
Yeah.
But,
No, I know,
but,
but I'm not going to go there and start correcting because
but
it's right.
but
It's right enough for the conversation.
It's right enough for the conversation. Yeah. I mean, she said, "Oh my God, that sounds incredibly interesting." And while I was talking to her, she found your channel online and said, "Oh my God, there you are." She was all excited.
Well,
Um,
I had a meeting this week with a Stanford professor who works
can
on.
I, before we go any further, I always mean to ask this, and uh, take it as a granted. You can always say, I don't want to answer that question, or it's none of your
Right.
business.
Right.
Are you officially, do you have some sort of semi-official connection still to Microsoft, or is it that you just work with a lot of people who you came across in the course of your Microsoft days, or are you
Yeah.
officially?
I have no official connection to Microsoft.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not paid by them, and they don't own me. The only thing they have is my signature on a contract saying that I won't disparage their good name. So in exchange for my severance package. So um, that's it. Um, Interestingly
Okay.
enough, a week ago, my exact old job came up. It got recreated from scratch, whole cloth, and it's the exact job I had that I was laid off from.
Huh.
So I applied, and I was immediately rejected. So good to know. Um, but I mean, obviously, it's uh, not the same team, not the same people. So
Right.
they probably don't want the former junta to suddenly be back in
Yeah,
their
you're
backyard.
you're tainted by your connection
Yeah,
with the old
exactly.
regime.
Yeah, yeah. So it totally makes sense. Um, what was I going to say? Let me think. Oh, I had a great conversation with a Stanford professor who focuses on low temperature diamonds. We'll get these. Who focuses on collaboration and has her own work and stuff like that. And a friend of mine who works on 3D AI to help 3D modeling from flat pictures, he introduced me to her, and she got it immediately. I mean, I didn't even have to really go that far into it. And she said, well, how are you doing this and how are you doing that? And so she wants to do a follow up meeting and is introducing me to a bunch of people who, in the Stanford community are trying to do, vaguely similar things. Nobody's doing exactly this because it seems too hard to a lot of people. But the connection with the totem idea, the idea that I've gotten better at talking about, which is this idea that you don't have to actually facilitate. The AI doesn't need to speak or I'm not at optimal yield yet. That's really crazy. I'm trying to get enough of these charges into this asteroid to get what they call optimal yield. And if you
Yeah.
put too many in, you don't get enough goodies, right? And if you put too few in, it doesn't blow up, and you used up all the fissures. So you're trying to get just the right amount. And unfortunately, the seismic charges that we use, it's easy to make them very powerful. It's hard to make them less powerful. You know,
Ah,
uh, so it's a bit of a dance um, trying to get it just right. And then what I do
this.
is right, and then I have to wait for the charges to detonate. I don't have to wait. I could detonate them quicker, but I have to get 3 collectors out, little collectors. Then I have to open the cargo scoop, and then I get as close as I dare because I like how the explosion looks. so I so I drift closer and closer and closer, and then it says imminent mining detonation detected, and it does the 3, 2, 1. And just so you know, Larry, I can't hear it because of the way I've set up our audio.
Oh,
So
I can't.
you can, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then it does that thing where it kind of shakes the ship and does that. I just love the sound designer. Like,
It's like going to a fireworks show.
yeah, and then it blows up, and your little limpets go out, and they're traveling out there right now to go collect some of the goodies, and then you have to switch over to uh, your abrasion blaster because some of the chunks didn't fly free. They're still attached to the rocks, and then you kind of get this little fun game of trying to blow the little chunks off of the asteroid pieces, um, and you congratulate yourself for being able to do it in one shot, um, and sometimes though it takes many shots, and you also have to do this thing where you see those 4 right there. The asteroid is
Yep.
slowly rotating. You can only hit them when they're blue. When they're dotted like that, that means they're on the other side of the asteroid that you're looking at.
Ah,
And so, but trying to rotate around the asteroid is a little dangerous because there's chunks everywhere, right? You just released a lot of debris into the air. So, um, so you kind of have to keep an eye like maybe someday, Commander, you could actually tell me when I lose a limpet, for instance, right? Because sometimes the limpets say limpet collector failed, and then I have to go over here, and then I have to release another collector because I want all three working at the same time, right?
Are
And
the limpet are the limpet collectors those things that look like cigars with little lights on them?
yes, the little white lights flying about, right?
Okay,
They're the limpet collectors,
okay. Oh, so
and
they're just white lights. Okay.
yep, and their job is to just, and this is a silly thing in the game, but they make it so that they are one-time use, meaning when you launch them, they do their job, and then you can never get them back in your hold, like they're gone, which is silly. But so now I've blasted all of the bits. So what I do is I just enjoy the remaining moments of limpet collecting, right? And just pull back.
Is
And
that our ship?
that's our ship, and those are the limpets putting bits of low temperature diamonds in our hold. And so if one of those disappears and dies, I have to go back to the other view and launch another limpet collector. Like I don't see that one that went to
Yeah,
the.
right. I saw one
Yeah,
disappear.
I saw one disappear. I think maybe he's gone. Um, and the computer will say something like, you know, limpet lost or something. But like I said, I can't hear the
And is
computer.
it Limpet?
Yes, there. I got another limpet out. Limpet. And so then I can go back to our view. That's me.
That's
And
you.
yeah, and if we had you connected via another Xbox, you'd be sitting in one of these chairs. But
Ah,
we haven't gotten that fancy. So there we go. We just finished watching the collection process. I like that view. So where were we? So anyway, yeah, I was excited by. I'm excited by how fast people seem to be getting it these days, and that is very different than from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, people were like, "Why would that even matter? Why would you care?" Right? Like, that's not as useful as Alexa, right? And it's like actually, it's way more useful than Alexa, but we're at a different stage now, and I think that means
yeah,
that
it's very true.
yeah,
I think one of the things that's happened even is that people are realizing the limitations of the approaches that have been taken.
yeah,
I,
there,
when faced with a lot of flux.
yeah, or when it's funny. I was in a conversation recently, and um, they were talking about how algorithms work. Period. Just how AIs are just machine learning. You shouldn't even call it AI. Just machine learning, the way it works. And the way they do it right now, Larry, is they get together a set of data they call the training data, right? So if you're trying to detect heart murmurs, you give it a huge amount of heart murmur data, and then you get it really good at detecting those, so that doctors, who look at the same data go, "Yep, that was a heart murmur," and the AI is like, "Good, I predicted it correctly." And then once they're done, they're like, "Okay, good, this algorithm knows how to detect heart murmurs," and they don't keep updating the training data.
Ah,
And that means that if there's new insights into how to detect heart murmurs, you have to do another algorithm from scratch. Or you have to create a new training data set for that algorithm. It's almost like they were like, build it once and then keep using it.
sounds like the
Right?
limpets. Um,
Yeah, 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 actually.
now, is that because it's easier to build it if you don't have to build it so that it is updatable, or is it just not occurred to anybody?
it has occurred to everybody, and everybody would argue with the words that I'm saying right now. If we had some AI specialists on the phone, I mean on the line right now, we would have a 2 hour argument about the exact taxonomy that I used to say those words to you to give you the impression that I gave you. But what I said is true, now to varying degrees. But what's really, really hard is to create a feedback loop where the action you're taking then allows the algorithm to go back and say, well, let me re-examine all my assumptions.
Right.
And that's what we're really, really, really bad at.
Right. So it's the difference between simply putting in new hard data,
yep,
and putting in new, basically, insights, which if it's been constructed to be able to do so, it can go back and examine its own beliefs and see if they need to be adjusted based on this new information, not just added to it, but they have to go back and reconstruct things which they thought were true in a certain way, which they now may have to see in a slightly different way.
Right. Now, there are algorithms that can do that, but they can only do it for things like there's a company out there called Pattern Computer, right? And Mark Anderson is the CEO and founder of Pattern Computer. And I got to interview him in an event that I did recently. And he is one of those people who would steadfastly disagree with what I just said, because he's like, hey, we at Pattern Computer have actually created a set of algorithms that look for patterns, period. That's what the algorithm does. And so if the data set changes, our algorithms are going to say, hey, look, new patterns. But that doesn't change the actions that the algorithm takes. Right? And so first of all, kudos to Pattern Computer for, doing what they did. That's brilliant, right? I'm not trying to diss these wonderful people, right?
Right, but then the next section is the way in which it becomes like
adaptive.
applicable.
Yeah, adaptive. Right. And so what I thought about was this idea of, well, what is it? So when I interviewed 100 algorithm implementations for Fortune 500 companies, because I did that at one point, right? What I found was that the action taking part was the hardest. What action do you trust an algorithm to take without a bunch of human beings confirming that action should be taken? And it turns out not many. Not many.
Yeah.
Although when it comes to actions that seem kind of vague, like for instance denying you a loan or rejecting your resume, right? Then since nobody's ever going to double check that work, and it doesn't what's the right word? Cause a major issue, right? Nobody's going to sue you or whatever, at least not right now. Then they don't mind algorithms that take those actions, right? Because it saves people energy and time. But it's not the same thing. When the elevator company, gosh, I forgot their name, but they design elevators, okay? And they wanted to design an algorithm that would be hooked up to a bunch of sensors in all of their elevators in all of the buildings where they've sold elevators, so that they could detect when parts were likely to fail, way before they would actually fail, so that the repair guy would show up while the elevator's still working instead of waiting for the elevator to break, right? Great idea. And some of the things that algorithm could have done would have actually fixed the elevator without the repair guy going out. But because it's an elevator, and if something goes wrong and people would die, they can't do that, right?
Yeah.
It's just too scary. And so they don't. They have a set of training data, they predict things, and then they try to, but the predictions actually aren't as awesome as human beings sitting and looking at the same data, right? From those
Right.
same sensors. It's the sensors that are amazing, not the algorithm that's looking at the data from the sensors. And nowhere is this
Because
more right.
they can't afford for it to be wrong.
Right. They can't afford for it to be wrong, and nowhere is that more apparent than in. Okay, so this asteroid is bromelite. Bromelite. Yeah, and bromelite is worth jack all. So we're just gonna skip that one. Just fills up. It just fills up our cargo hold with stuff that we don't actually want. So yeah, so the elevator company is like, okay, we're good, right? But meanwhile, in Australia, you know how they have uh, these mining trucks that are like the size of a four-story building. You know, like these
Yeah.
gigantic trucks. Those have sensors in them and can be driven around the mining site by an artificial intelligence, right? Same with little tiny platform trucks in warehouses. They can move pallets around and do it automatically. But that's only because they know exactly which warehouse they're in, and they have little labels to read. It's that's not really what we would call an AI. That's what we would
Right.
call just a really cool algorithm, right? And a bunch of training data. And so you're still paying a company a lot of money to show up at your warehouse, install their little robots, teach the robots, and then leave, right? Um, but if we want a robot that actually listens to humans, humans are not consistent. The training data for getting to know humans is never done, ever, 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 ever,
Yeah.
right? Because one guy's like, smokers are the best, and then a year later, that person quits smoking, and they sound completely different. They're like, smokers are evil, and right, and do you call this person a liar? Do you, right? How do you deal with that kind of training data, right? So you need constant feedback loops. That's the conclusion I came to. You need the ability to not make decisions for humans based on whether or not it's right for them, but rather make decisions for humans so that they'll react to the decisions. And that's how I came up with the term, it should be dialogue. Because dialogue is how humans decide whether or not a decision is a good decision.
That's true. Both internal and external dialogue.
Right. So that's the exciting part. The hard part, though, is I spoke to our developer for Corvox's initial state, and he thinks it's going to be worst case scenario 6 months before his code is done. He did show me his code yesterday, which is very exciting. Anytime you see running code of an idea that you came up with, I guess it's kind of like getting your dailies. I don't know if you feel the same way about dailies though, because then it's work to do. Like you have to watch
Well,
them.
I have my own version of things like that. It was you know Scarlet, the infamous
Yep,
Scarlet,
yep, yep.
which was based on on this egregious book that was the size of what the Manhattan telephone book used to look like.
Yep.
And but it had virtually no story in it. It was like 800 pages, and it was consisted of Scarlet shopping at the racetrack, or at gambling somewhere. They'd occasionally run into each other, have a fight, and then split. And then toward the end of the 800 pages, they both end up at the same fancy race and decide to give it another try. And that was it.
Right.
And it was to be an 8-hour miniseries, but we got about halfway through, and we were just out of story.
Yeah.
And I, who had never seen or read um, uh, Gone with the Wind, I had Roxanne explain the basic characters to me.
Mm-hmm.
Said, "All right, how about if Scarlett is raped and arrested for murder because the person who raped her was a low grade nobleman in the province of Ireland where she was, and had a lot of power. And that ended up being, that was like the propelled the second half of the story. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I sat in Daly's and saw her. There was a scene with her looking up out at the sunlight, and coming in through the jail window, and wondering if she would ever, stand in the sun again. And I thought, my God, that's something I just said in a meeting.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this is fucking Gone with the Wind, and there it is. And,
Wow.
and millions of people are going to see it just because I said it.
Yeah.
So I do understand.
That's how I felt the first time a one act play that I had written was just picked up by somebody and produced. You know what I mean? And then you just
Yeah.
show up. You're the writer, so you have nothing to do with it anymore. But you just show up, and it's like they're like, yeah, well, this is what we did with it, and you're just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of amazing because you just wrote it, right? But then it's like a thing. So and it feels the same way with software, except with software, you're trying to create something that ideally not only creates a long-term business model that will evolve eternally, but also uh, it's what's the right word? It's it it doesn't tell the story in front of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it represents 1,000 potential stories. Does that make sense? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know how people will actually use software, right? When Microsoft launches software, they still have no idea how the customers will actually use it. The developers think they know, the producers, all of those people. We always think we know how people will use the software, and then we get the telemetry data back, and we're like, why are they doing that, right? Like, I didn't even think to use it that way. It's like inventing a hammer and not expecting people to kill each other with it. You know,
Yeah.
it's it's very strange. So to see code running, it's both the most frustrating thing and also just sort of like it just represents like a billion possibilities.
Exhilarating. That's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah. So anyway, he says 6 months, so we're gonna wait. And that's Jasper Yao, by the way, the guy that I mentioned maybe in the
And
past.
and right. I remember Jasper. And you had explained it was going to be a slow process, and at first it was going to be a mess.
Yeah,
Uh,
it will be.
and
Yeah,
and but you pretty much everything that 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 turns out to be worthwhile generally starts in that stage,
yeah. Ooh, ooh, ow. Yep.
including life.
Yeah, and the more I think about this idea of Corvox, the more I realize that I have to embrace the idea that slow is a superpower.
Slow as a what?
Superpower. In
Ah,
in in the corporate circles that I have run in my life, corporations like to talk about what is our superpower. It's like the buzzword bingo of my time in corporate America, right? And and so they're always like, "Oh, our superpower is whatever. We're really good at this." And I think slow is Corvox's superpower because what you're going for is something that's inexorable, that is going to happen whether you're a part of it or not, right? Not, oh, we were the first to invent this tool, right? But
right,
we were the first to invent this tool with the right principles still intact. And I think that's the hard part is getting that because the principles don't want to
well,
stay
getting
intact.
getting the way culture has evolved, getting people, even yourself, to embrace the idea that slowness is a virtue.
Right.
If it's not because someone isn't trying or is procrastinating, but because the only way to get where you want to get is slowly,
Right.
or you will miss things along the way
Yeah.
if you try and rush. I think I may have I think it was you in an email, maybe it was somebody else. People who worked on the medieval cathedrals, many of them took a minimum of 3 generations,
Yeah.
and the people spent their entire lives working on it, knowing they would never see even like you know, a schematic of what it would look like when it was done, nor would their sons, who would be the next generation of stonemasons, maybe it would be the next generation.
Right.
Um, and by then, it might look very different than what they first started out thinking that how they build it, because they would discover that some structural choices that they made didn't work. Um, in Egypt, you can trace the evolution of the pyramid. Do you know about this?
No, go ahead.
Okay. The original Egyptian tombs were called mastabas, Mastabs, and they were basically just a flat roofed big rectangle.
Okay.
Uh, and then somebody got the idea of putting another mastaba on top of that mastaba that was slightly smaller to make so it was like a 2-story one, but
Mm-hmm.
stepped back.
Right.
And then somebody tried putting on a third and a fourth. And the earliest thing they call a pyramid is a step pyramid, and that's what it is. The sides aren't smoothed in; it's just a series of smaller mastabas on top of each other, so that you end up with a visual, with a rough sketch of a pyramid.
Right.
And then there is a pyramid which they tried to figure out how to fill in the sides and keep everything structurally sound. And 2/3 of the way through, the top part collapsed, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still there. They just left it and moved on, and eventually got to what we think of as the pyramids.
Right.
I, but there, but and we're only seeing a fraction of what the steps probably were along the way. They're
Right.
just the few
We
little
can all.
pieces that
Right.
are
We can.
left to see. But
Right.
it was done in steps, and along the way, um, one of the major cathedrals, I don't remember which one, but one of the major cathedrals half collapsed while it was being built, and they had to start over. It was it's they're all the process of a slow process in which the advances are made through mistakes.
Right. Right. And I noticed that in the culture that I've participated in for most of my corporate career, it's quite the opposite. Everybody wants a sure thing.
Oh yeah, because in the world we live in, and with stock dividend, people waiting for dividend, nobody, you don't get a reward for the fact that 100 years from now, something that you're doing is going to, you know, make humanity's life infinitely better.
Right. Right.
You only get a reward if if the annual report for this year is better than the annual report for last year.
Right. And so it really helps me to think about, well, what's a model that once it starts making money gets stronger and stronger? Like, what does that mean? What do I mean when I say that? Like, I think that's fascinating. Um, because then that behaves a lot like a Trojan horse from a culture perspective. Because people are like, oh, you're a happy little small business and you're doing this little cute thing. Um, and then, a decade later, they're like, oh, I can't imagine life without it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, really interesting. So, that's how I hit it.
But it must be nice for you to know that in the course of even a few years, more people are responsive to the concept.
Oh yeah, that just feels amazing.
Other people have noticed that they're running up against a limitation, trying to do it the way it's been done.
Yeah, and those people tend to be people who were concerned from the very beginning. They were sort of like, okay, this is how we have to do it, but just something is a little off. Why do I, like, where are we going with this, right? Um, and it's like that example of the guys who wanted to teach an AI by creating two AIs and teaching them how to speak to each other, and then
Uh-huh.
giving them tasks they had to accomplish by speaking to one another, and then suddenly the AIs stopped using the English that the researchers had taught them, and basically developed their own language and started speaking to each other much faster. And so they could no longer tell what they were saying to each other, and so they had to unplug the whole thing and ditch the experiment. Right?
That happens with twins.
Really?
Yeah,
They invent.
identical. It's not unusual, and it's a developmental stage which they pass through, but it is not unusual for identical twins around the age of 2 or 3 to develop a language which only they understand.
Hmm. Well, there you go.
And apparently it can be quite creepy if you're the parents, because they'll be talking to each other in turn, look at their parents and laugh, and you have no idea what they're talking about.
Right. Well, that's what the AI researchers felt like, except the AIs weren't laughing; they were just accelerating.
And so I see we don't know what they're doing. We're going to unplug it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on a simple consumer level, as you were talking, I was thinking about how, you know, it's going to be a long time between when they first have cars, which I know there are upper end cars now that will parallel park themselves.
Right.
I it's going to be a long time, probably longer than my lifespan, before I would be comfortable turning that responsibility over to an automobile and
Mm-hmm.
just sit there and hope that there wasn't a glitch.
Right. Right. Totally understand that. I mean, the last car I bought was kind of a big deal for me because um, at first I was looking at the Teslas and I really wanted the electric car, but then I looked at just the software and the self-driving and everything, and how easy they were to hack, and I just said, you know what, I can't do that, right? I'm just not going to be a part of that yet. So then my whole focus changed, and I wanted a car with as little software in it as possible, but that still had as much of the features and safety and cool factors,
Right.
right, that I could get. And and it turns out that what fit that bill was like Honda's version of, like, how Honda every once in a while makes like a Roadster or something, and they don't make
Right.
very many of them, and it's all about just the love of cars and all that kind of stuff. I bought basically one of those. I bought the Honda Civic Type R, which is like
Ah,
310 horsepower, which I can't. It's too much, really, for my needs. But what I like about the car is there's there's very little in there that you know isn't just a car, right?
right.
And yet it has most of the modern safety features that I would want. So
Yeah.
uh, and it's a stick, which it probably is the last stick I'll ever be allowed to own. So because that phase is over. There's no good reason for a stick anymore. You know what I mean?
The
So
the staff in my building here, um, the valets, if somebody has a stick, they have to let them in. The insurance for the building actually requires the valet to park the car in the garage, but if it's a stick car, they have to let the owner do it because none of them know how to drive a stick
yeah, yeah, that's
because they've never encountered one.
right, right. Well, it's the best anti-theft device. I'll tell you that for sure.
That's a
Yeah,
funny. I had a funny thought. How the hell do
yeah,
you move this thing?
yeah. They're like, we broke in. Yeah, but we can't drive it. Oh well. So, um, I mean, obviously, a high-end thief would know how to drive a stick because all the high-end sports cars are
Right.
stick. But the Honda Type R is like the poor man's sports car, right? It's not some kind of like crazy, Lamborghini or Porsche, or you know what I mean.
Right.
It's a Civic, for crying out loud. So it's like expensive for a Civic, but it's not. It's not even in the ballpark of, um, you know, the big sports cars of the world. So that's why I like it, right? Because I get all the
Makes,
fun
makes
without
sense
the
to me.
yeah. Um, but it does eat a lot of gas though. That does bother me, but whatever. There,
Do you do a lot of driving?
not in the last year. I haven't.
Alexa, stop. That was my signal to start eating. Alexa, stop. That was my signal to start eating.
Okay. All right. Let's get 3 limpets out here. And imminent mining detected.
A limpet is a kind of barnacle.
I know, and yet they called them limpets. Oh,
But I think there's also a movie in which Don Knotts plays Mr.
yeah,
The amazing Mr. Limpet.
the incredible Mr. Limpet. Yes.
The Incredible.
Yep, I watched that many times. He saves the ship because he's a man who's turned into a fish. What am I doing now? Oh yeah, I am shooting the abrasion blaster.
There.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
Don Knotts' predecessor in terms of physique and sort of like the niche of characters he played was a guy named Wally Cox.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen him. COX. He was on TV in I think the very first thing that I'm aware of. He played a teacher whose name was Mr. Peepers because he had like Coca bottle glasses.
Mm-hmm.
On Our Miss Brooks, which was a show show in a high school. But then he went in on he was a character actor who played those pencil neck geeks.
Right.
He was also one of, or most probably, Marlon Brando's best friend.
Oh.
And as a matter of fact, Marlon Brando stole his body when he died from the funeral home, and then took it back to his house. And I don't know what happened from it there, and they were always rumored to have had a sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Marlon Brando most definitely was open to all possibilities. But
right.
when I was on the Susskind show, we did a show on gossip.
Okay.
And we had the heads of various gossip magazines. The cheesiest gossip magazine on the stands was something called Bill Dakota's Confidential Hollywood Star. It was printed on newsprint with a cover that was just one step ahead of it was like glossy newsprint.
Okay.
And it was published erratically because Bill Dakota was frequently picked up in bus station men's rooms doing things he shouldn't be doing.
Ah, okay.
I don't think I've had him on the show, but I got to read a number of issues of it, and in the letters to the editor of this one particular issue, it said, "Dear editor, I have heard that Marlon Brando was bisexual. Is this true?" And the answer was, "Dear reader, we have a picture of Marlon Brando with his mouth around Wally Cox's dick. Is that bisexual enough for you?" I just thought it was the best exchange.
Is that good enough for you? Well, yeah, all right. Okay, I'll take it.
Is that bisexual enough for you? So, yep, that would do it.
Let's do it. I still like the stories that Brando didn't want to be shot below the waist, so he'd show up with no pants on set for Heat. He did Heat, I think, and there's all these scenes where he's like, sitting at a bar or whatever, and he had told the director not to shoot him below the waist, but the director, he didn't trust him, So he would just show up naked from the waist down.
Yeah, he had a
And,
tendency to do stuff like that.
yeah, and he's like, man, now you can't use it. So I also like Brando's line when he was talking to some interviewer about acting, and he said, "Do you really want to understand the heart of every actor?" He said, "Sure." He says, "Look at me, look 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 at me." And
That's pretty good.
yeah, I was like, that's pretty good, you know. Oh, I should have paid attention to that. Well, I didn't blow up the ship, so that's good. And we've managed to get.
That is good.
Let's see what we've got. We've got microbial furnaces from an earlier job we did, killing a pirate. We've managed to manufacture 34 low temperature diamonds and 32 void opals. So that's very good. The bromellite isn't worth anything. So then what we're going to do is, and this is the oddest part of this game, is I'm now going to a different PC, Larry. One that you can't see right now, and I'm loading up a website that is plugged into the data from the game. And what I'm going to do is look up where the best price for those materials is in the galaxy, in the bubble. And then we're going to fly there and sell our goods. So I have to type in Elite Dangerous. ADING, trading, and then there it is, EDDB. And so, and then I say commodities.
So do bad guys who might raid you to get your stuff hang around along the pathway to the places where the best prices are got?
Absolutely they do. And they're very often real players.
Ooh.
So what happens is we have a 20-30% chance, depending on how profitable it is right now for the things that we're trying to sell, to have an actual player message us and say, whatever, and then I'm going to attempt to thwart them, because I never give in. Because usually what they'll say is, drop 14 tons of your low temperature diamonds and I'll let you live. That's what they do. And so we have to make a choice. Do we give in, or do we, Okay, so the highest price for void opals is, what system are we currently in? Let me see. We are in LP 336-4. Okay? So LP 336-4. Right? That's what it was? LP space 336-4. Okay. And then we need a large landing pad because we're a large ship. And we want to sell. Find stations. Okay, and our best price is $500,000, just under $500,000 per low temperature diamond, or void opal, per void opal, and it's only 25 light years away, and that's 200% over the market rate. So we're going to Fontana Horizons in LHS 3609. So LHS 3609.
And so why would somebody offer 5 times the going rate?
Because they need that material at that station, and they want to convince people to fly to their location, and so they have to offer a higher price to convince us to fly there. Other stations are located much closer to void opals, and so they don't have to offer as high a price.
Got it.
And these stations are all automated. They're procedurally generated and procedurally run. So it's a market, but the market doesn't have real people affecting the market. And except for us, if enough of us fly to Fontana Horizons, the price there will go down, right?
Ah.
So let me just remember what I was doing. I am going to LHS space 6309 6309. Enter. And there it is. That's our best price. And okay, here we go. We're now going to leave here. First get out of our dust cloud. And we're not allowed to go to warp until we've gotten away from these rocks by a fair amount, because they interrupt our drive system. Okay. Just get away for a little bit. We're waiting for that little corner on the right corner under our fuel. It says mass locked, and it has like a little white square. When that turns off, there we go. We can go to faster than light, and then from faster than light, we'll go to witch space.
And next thing you know, it'll be younger than springtime.
That's right. There we go. So now we're in the external. So, we're below the rings of the ring system that we were just hanging out in.
Okay.
And so we have to clear those, and then we can head to. It's 2 jumps to get from where we are to where we want to sell. And while we do that, I'm going to just quickly yeah, that's not a bad price. Okay. Okay, closest. All right, okay. I didn't understand the website perfectly, so that's why I had to double check some stuff. We're also low on fuel, so I'm going to fuel scoop here. Hopefully without frying the ship systems.
I'm going to take a short break here and dispose of my lunch to treat us. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this place has a neutron star, which is quite bright and also very powerful. So we're going to head to a different place, and it's going to be called SAMBUR.
You mean you've changed destinations?
I am in the process of changing destinations. Yes, I'm not happy with the first destination that I picked.
Maybe that's why they're offering so much.
Yeah, SAMBUR ITJA. Enter. Okay, considerably farther away, but that's okay. And now we can head there. Okay, so we have a bit of a journey. Oh, there's 2 stars here. Oh, there's a sun right behind me and a sun and a neutron star in front of me. Okay. So, there we go. We're all full up. So we can head off to Zeta Hercules. So would you say that the interface is making more sense over time, or does it feel like a, I don't know, like just a pattern of movement with some explanation? What would you say is your
You mean watching what you're doing?
yeah, like how much? What do you feel? What does it feel like? Does it feel like you're like, oh yeah, he's going
Well,
here or he's doing that or
um, I still need you to explain, what particular activity you are involved in. But once you've explained it, I can kind of I'm pretty well follow, you know, the 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 gist of what's going on. I
mm,
can't I can't on the screen read all the little readouts that you can
right,
that are
right, of
in the
course,
middle,
yeah,
and I don't know what a lot of them mean.
mm-hmm.
But I know the difference between when you're collecting stuff, when there's jeopardy from a somebody who's either you happen to be in proximity to somebody who's in jeopardy, or that even if they're not after you,
Mm-hmm.
or jeopardy that actually is somebody who is after you, or jeopardy to be avoided. Like I gather that a giant neutron star knows something about the the galaxy where you were was had a higher degree of risk than the benefit was worth,
Mm-hmm.
and so you made another choice. And how you're doing what you're doing, is beyond me. But
Yeah, but that's totally irrelevant, right? It
but
doesn't
but
matter,
but
right?
yeah, I feel like I'm watching sort of a silent movie.
Yeah,
Okay?
okay,
And except that I have somebody who I can ask, questions if something's happening that I don't understand.
okay, good. Well, that feels good. I always
Yeah, no,
wondered.
it doesn't just look like we are walking down the arcade and seeing yet another video game and something
Right, right.
with a lot of mayhem on the screen that makes no more sense to me than any of the others with all the mayhem.
There's more gore and violence. Rah! Right. And there are some beautiful moments. So, um, okay, so we were talking about the product. Obviously, it won't be ready for another 6 months. And I talked to that Stanford professor who got very excited, which is nice. Um, and then the question became, well, uh, what kind of what would convince Larry Strikeman that an AI was reflecting whether or not his dialogue was productive or not without offending Larry Strikeman?
What would offend me?
Well, let's say that you're talking and you're telling a story, and the pixels turn like a dark blue and they move slower, and for some reason that seems to indicate that that maybe your story's too long or that it's not productive or something. I don't know. That might offend you. You might be like, I'm Larry Strikeman. I know what I'm talking about. So I'd have to
Well,
design something in the interface so that you could indicate that so that the interface would correct itself or acknowledge, somehow create room for being wrong. Does that make sense?
yeah, it's a little hard. It's a little hard to discuss in the abstract.
Of
I
course.
Because I am. It's no longer nearly as important to me to always be getting things right. My I
Well, then we have to
I,
imagine another person. Yeah.
I like to think that a significant part of my response would be, I wonder what it is that I'm doing that's making it respond that way. Um,
Right.
am I,
That would
am I
that would be
talking?
right.
Am I talking too fast? Am I repeating myself? Have I strayed off topic? Have I introduced an idea which is actually going to turn out to be non-productive, and it already recognizes that, and I haven't noticed it myself? I, because it's not a real thing to me in the sense that I have I have something, um, that 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 my existence is not dependent on getting it right.
Right. Right.
So if I'm wrong, it's okay.
Well, let me ask the question a slightly different way. Um, the the image and the way it behaves in the beginning will be wrong. It
Right.
will it will be wrong. And so what I am trying to get to is this idea of I'm going to ignore that because eventually it's going to learn that this was productive.
Right.
Versus, oh, it's changing color. I'll have a self-reflective moment. So it's like people can hold both concepts at the same time if they believe they're participating in something that's going to help everybody in the future, right? So it's like I'll just let it be wrong for now because it's going to figure out based on how I'm talking that I'm right, right? But it at least gave me that moment of self-awareness to decide whether or not I'm right or it's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it would be helpful if when that was happening, that there was another human being to bounce the question off of.
Well, yeah. Ideally, this is like a conference call, like you and I are on a call,
It's
and
like,
and we're like,
is it just me? Yeah, so you can sort of, say, is it just me who thinks that this isn't as bad as Corvox thinks it is? Right.
right, right, and then
there,
everybody
there,
can, yeah,
there are times, for instance, like with when I use a GPS, where it will ask me to do something or tell me to do something, and I will go, oh, it's because it's in a shopping mall, and
right,
the way it perceives addresses in a shopping mall is not as if it's a shopping mall. It's as if it's a continuation of a grid that actually is interrupted by the shopping mall. So if I
right,
follow it, I'm going to end up like looking at the back of a Target.
right,
You know,
right,
when I'm trying to find a Toys R Us.
right.
Um, and so I'm just going to ignore that particular command because it's
It's not relevant to me, right?
here's what just popped into my head. One of the key um, concepts, revelations, understandings that for me of my brain that has happened in the course of therapy is that I've come to see it as a series of intelligences, which are interwoven in a way which I will never be able to understand, and don't even know how many of them there are.
Mm-hmm.
But they. Now, why am I telling you this? But um, but sometimes there'll be a strong urge to do something which a larger part of me knows in the long run is not a good choice.
Right,
This isn't the time to give up on a certain thing, or this is not yelling at this person is not going to be helpful, or and what I'm able to do with I've come to think of my brain more as a consortium with the me that I think of as the conscious me, as the CEO,
mm-hmm.
and that sometimes that you have to let everybody have their say, because if you
Right,
try to shut them up, they'll find another way to communicate how they're feeling, and the harder you try to shut them up, the more likely it is that the way that they find will be more destructive than if you simply let them have their say.
yeah,
But that the way to deal with it is not to is to eventually someone has to be in charge and make a decision.
right,
And I must say, I can't remember. It must have been the New York Times science section that somebody was talking about a similar. They said the brain is not, it can't be a dictatorship, but it also can't be a democracy.
right,
And the way I will sometimes deal with things is I'll think, I know why that part of me wants to do that, but it's because it's operating off old information.
Mm-hmm.
It is no, nobody in the consortium is actively trying to fuck me up.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's offering what they think is the best advice that is in my best interest. It's
Right.
just that some are more up to date than others, and some are 3 years old, and some
Mm-hmm.
are 7 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them you have to gently, tell them that you understand, but that things have changed, and what was once the best possible response, given what responses were possible at that time, isn't the best response anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you sitting here and giving your opinion. It's just that you aren't fully informed.
Right. Right.
And that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
That
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
it helps me to just accept, that it was actually Karen, my sobriety counselor, who introduced to me the idea that even the part of you that wants to drink is trying to help you.
Right.
It's not against you. It's doing the only thing it can think of to do to try and deal with some sort of internal turmoil or pain with what it knows of as available.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually destructive, but it doesn't know that that's not why it's doing it. It's
Right.
trying to help.
Right.
And if you treat it as an enemy, you will just make things worse. You have to somehow accommodate it into your the way you change without trying to discard it, because you can't. It will
Right.
always be there. But it can be given a different role. And over time, actually, as I think about it, gosh, this is fascinating. If you're given enough, at least in some cases, with me, I think in a lot of cases, if you've given enough time and you stay at it, it's a little like what we talked about a couple sessions ago about getting people to hang around and hear things that are not what they believe, but there was something that happened that made them, decide, like, stand at the edge of the crowd and just see what's going on.
Right.
Those other parts of your brain can change. They can absorb new information, so that even they recognize that they're about to do something, or that their idea of what should be done needs to be rethought, and they'll kind of work it out on their own.
Right.
If they're treated as um, um, a part of the whole that is just there, and is part of you, and you can't surgically remove part of you and still be you.
That's right. Yeah. They're
Uh,
not. They're not. What's it called? They're receiving the respect as a as a as a valid participant.
yeah,
Even.
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And
Respect.
and all of them are there because at some point in time they were survival mechanisms for me, which probably, given some of the stuff that happened to me as a kid, kept me from becoming a sociopath.
Right. Right.
And so I owe them a lot.
Right.
And right, everybody's allowed to keep their dignity.
Right. And that's what this system. Whoa, 2 stars. Okay, let's just be a little careful here. Um, and that's what. So whatever this visualization is, if you're somebody who says that's a fucking stupid idea every third sentence, right? I still need you to feel like you're a valid participant.
Right.
Because for your pattern of speaking, that's actually you being really nice. I
Yeah.
don't mean you, Larry. I mean for that person.
No, I know. No, I know what you
Yeah.
mean. When Michael Ovitz was head of CAA, the Creative Artization, back when it was the big, which is not anymore. But apparently, the most terrifying thing that he could say to you if he called you in his office and the door shut the door and asked you to sit down was to begin a conversation with, "I'm confused."
Right. Right. That's terrifying.
You did I was told by friends, and I realized it was true, that if I start a conversation, listen, pal, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
And yeah. I know what my triggers are too, and I'll. It's
uh,
funny.
um, but the that idea of allowing everyone to preserve their what at CBS, eventually all of my bosses, of which there were many, um, one, two, three, at least four vice presidents, and I think a couple of people that were maybe one level down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you often, as part of their exit deal, they would get a film commitment or two, which means they were guaranteed that over the within 3 years, CBS would produce a movie that they of theirs, or
That
they
they
would get it, or they get paid a penny,
right.
um, and they would need someone to report to. Every single one of them asked to report to me,
Wow.
and I know the reason is because they knew, and I said no to I think with one exception, I said no to every project because it just wasn't something we could do.
Mm-hmm.
But they left the room with their dignity
Right.
because I did not treat them any differently than I did when they were my boss.
Right. Right. And
I,
that's what everybody wants. That's what everybody wants. Is the
and
dignity.
people can deal with disappointment if you don't make them feel disappointing.
When I was a little kid, I thought I was clever, and I would write a little poem. It was one of those little poems that occurred to me, and it's not a very good poem, but I can't get it out of my head, um, because it ends with something that in the time I just thought was clever, and then over the course of my life, it gained more meaning, which is it's one of these things where it's like it goes some it's like talking about people. Men roam the earth. Some seek a lord, some seek justice, some seek this. It all rhymed. And then I said some live ribautual, some simply hide, but a real man will die for a little bit of pride. That was the end of it. And
Say the end again.
I said, but a real man will die for a little bit of pride. Meaning the thing you're willing to die for is your self
Mm-hmm.
dignity. And and I wrote it back then. I didn't know what I was writing because I just thought I was being clever. But that one stuck with me. That one line stuck with me because as I've encountered people over the course of my life, that's what matters. Is do I have my dignity or not? Right? Because shit happens, things go my way or don't go my way, whatever. But am I being treated with some kind of respect?
Yeah.
Right? And okay, we're looking for Caden Landing, and so one of the things I thought of with this product or this Corvox is that Corvox has to be wrong. There's no way for it to work without Corvox being wrong a lot of the time. So, but it also sometimes is going to be right, and over time it'll be right more often. But what it needs is to always have this feeling of exactly what you just described. That it's just simply a member of the consortium, right? And of your own brain. And it's simply trying to reflect what it's hearing. And it'll get better over time. And if you believe just those two things, you can forgive a lot and continue to use the product, the product, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that actually has to take a visual shape, right?
Yeah.
Like that goal is actually more important than what we described as the primary goal, which is it actually has to convince you that sometimes you're being productive and sometimes you're not. Like
Right.
first, it has to convince you of the mythology of what we just described, that it's going to
Yeah.
be wrong and eventually it's going to be more right, and you're contributing to all of humanity, and it's just a member of your consortium, right? Like that is really creating a mythology. That's creating a, like, believing in the American dream or believing in, freedom of expression or whatever, right? Like those are all things we tell ourselves because we want to believe in, because we want to make them more true, right? And that's what I think we're really in the business of here is what is that mythology? Like how could we even like how would we tell that story to somebody quickly, simply, efficiently? How would the interface
Yeah.
itself continually reinforce that mythology? That's the question that I'm constantly trying to ask people around me. Because they're like, "Oh, how does it work?" or "How does it look?" or "How does it?" I'm like, "I don't care as long as it accomplishes."
Yeah. Right.
Right? All I care about. Ooh, what's going on here? Okay. Um, is that it not that it allow a person who I can't even understand. They're just one of those people that's beyond my capacity to uh, communicate with, right? Um, that allows them to feel just as good about the interface as somebody who is perfectly aligned with me, right? Um,
Right.
that's that's what I have the most trouble with. So when my developer goes, "Oh, it's going to show this and it's going to show that," and it's I'm or the science of pauses, like the Stanford woman was going on about the science of how pauses work differently when somebody's excitable versus when they're not, or right, like there's a certain cadence to it, and there are algorithms that can detect that. Um, we've made another mistake, Commander. I'm
What
sorry.
have we What have we done?
I was not paying enough attention, and I took us to a space station, this one right here, that has the
Hmm.
highest price, but they have no landing pad large enough for a ship our size.
Ah,
So I now need to fix that problem. Wow. Okay, that's all right. It's just
you
more
can't just
travel.
yell.
Yeah, yeah. Open fire. So, where was I? Oh, so so for me, one of the most productive conversations I can have with you is one where I just simply ask the question, well, what triggers those feelings, right? What triggers the feelings of that mythology versus things that threaten that mythology for any personality that you ever had to make a movie for, right? Like remember how we would talk about how you just had an intuition or a knowledge of the culture of Middle America that gave you a distinct advantage, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Well, that's a perfect example of the conversation I want to have, which is how would that person, those people, feel like they never ever wanted to have a conversation again without this member of the consortium present, even though it can be wrong a lot of the time? Is it because it's funny? Is it because it's charming? Is it because it's, I don't know, novel? Is it because it's insightful? Right? Like, you have to start somewhere knowing that you're going to be wrong a lot of the time, right? So we have to pick, like, it's almost like we have to pick like, what kind of movie are we going to make? Like, is it Disease of the Week, Woman in Wheat, remember yeah,
Women in wheat. Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's like that. I have to pick a tone that can carry that mythology. And I don't even know if mythology is the right word because I don't want to call it a brand promise. That sounds terrible, and I don't want to call it a. Uh, it it's something. It's it's like when you write a constitution. You're making a promise, right? That's kind of what you're trying to. You're creating a belief system. Um, that diversity is valuable. That your perspective is valued, but that you can always be better, right? That you can get new insights. That's what I'm trying to say, but without all the things in my words that would set people off, that would make them go, well, what makes you think you can help me get blah blah blah? Because
Yeah.
people, you know. So I've gone through versions of this where I think of it as like, I don't know, uh, for teenagers, right? Or I think about for people who currently believe that in QAnon, or I think about it for you know uh, people that don't trust any kind of technology. That these are the kind of things that I'm trying to think about and saying, well, humor doesn't work with serious people, but serious doesn't work when you're wrong 50% of the time. You know,
Right.
so so it's like I'm trying to. That's what I'm struggling with, and I don't want you to answer it, Larry, but I do want you to just react to. Just tell me what that makes you think. Like, does that remind you of something, or
Um,
like, what does that pop into your head?
well, it makes me think like I mean, it's a, um, it, I mean, it's kind of like, it's one step away from what's it all about anyway.
Yeah,
I,
right.
um, but earlier on when we were talking, and I don't remember the specific, um, but you were discussing your concept of what you want Korvacs to be able to do, or its way of participating in in the world of of us human beings. I flashed on what I believe is the trippiest book in the New Testament is the book of John.
Oh yeah,
I,
totally.
um, and I believe that the first sentence of it is, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among men."
Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing some.
And
Yeah.
and all I can tell you is when you said what goes through your mind, that's what went through my mind.
In the beginning
Was that
was the word.
it has to be able to walk among us, not pretending to be one of us, but accepted as part of the community that is of value.
Yes, you're right.
And unfortunately, the way I know the things I know, like what you mentioned, are simply from observing. Well, it's what you want to do with Corvax. Is, what I know about Middle America is from living there.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that. But when I moved to New York, when somebody said I don't like that, it meant something very different than when somebody said I don't like that in a suburb of Chicago.
Right.
Depending on the circumstances. That Midwesterners avoid, at least used to avoid, direct confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
They would let you know they didn't like something by showing lack of enthusiasm, but not coming right out and saying that they didn't like it.
Right.
So what you had to do was read their level of enthusiasm. And if it was basically no, you had been told, I don't like that, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you waited for them to say that, you would get a call. You would get a call that you were no longer on the account.
Right.
But I only did it from living there and just noticing how people interacted with each other, and that actors who moved to California from New York would have. I know when, at least again, I think things may have changed. But when I first moved here, they'd move here from New York and they'd go to meetings, and they'd always come back exhilarated after meeting with a prospective agent or manager or a project. Said, "Oh God, it went so well, and they just told me that I did. It was a great reading, and they just loved me, and that they want to use me, and they'll be getting, and they just, and I'll be hearing from them, and then they never hear from anybody,
Right.
because at least at that time in California, you just didn't tell people that they stunk.
Right.
They had come from New York, where if somebody didn't like you,
They told
they
you.
might not only tell you that they didn't think you were right for this role, but you ought to look for a different line of work because you were never going to be a good actor.
Right.
Um, and so you had to learn that that there, you had to learn the nuances of enthusiasm as to, and know something sometimes about the person you were talking to as to whether it was just their way of dealing with the other human beings or whether they meant what they were saying. But you couldn't do it based solely on the meaning of the words.
Right.
Um, and that's so hard to communicate because it involves so many different kinds of intelligence operating at the same time, that um, I, I think I think it's an appropriate, beyond appropriate. I think it is the goal, but I think the only way it can happen is by learning.
Well,
Um,
and the way we accomplish that goal, I have figured out at least that part, which is before I'm listening for pauses or actually analyzing language or any of that good stuff, because the technology is not quite that far along yet. My my science is simple, which is if people keep talking and they're not getting ruder than their initial start point, right? Then that is that's better. If they keep talking, but they're not talking about the same thing, they just keep going all over the place, right? Um, then that is unknown. And if they just stop talking, then that's less productive. Or if they
right.
get ruder and louder, and you know, then that's less productive. And all the AI does is try to take those cues and turn them into any kind of gentle visual storytelling that's not too specific. So anything that people can project their own thoughts onto, because that's all we want to do is produce things that people will project onto, not things that tell you, but things that allow you to tell yourself. So, uh, so that allows us to listen. If we accomplish just that goal, then we get to figure out all the rest of it, right? Over time. But we won't even get the chance to learn all those other amazing things unless we can allow you to project onto the visualization that we're showing you that this AI is one, sensing more dialogue, sensing less dialogue, sensing you know a change in the baseline for just you and your co people, right? The people in this conversation,
Right.
and and that Corvox constantly is trying to figure out how likely it is that it's currently wrong.
Right.
Right, so Corvox is currently constantly trying to tell you how how likely it is to be wrong with what it thinks is going on in this conversation right now, so that you almost feel sorry for it in a way. You're kind of like, oh, you
Uh-huh.
poor little kid, you know, let me help you out with a few extra words that I wouldn't actually normally say, but I'm adding them in so that Corvox knows that it's actually right in this moment or it's wrong in this moment. And by the way, you saying it's right or wrong doesn't change its algorithm. It's still going to just keep doing the same trick
Right.
until we have enough volume of data to start going, we can now we can really advance this thing, right? So some might say that's kind of like a circus trick because it's not what you're trying to do is launch a product that doesn't actually do what it's promising to do in the future, but it has to do this circus trick in order to get enough feedback loops to deliver on the product promise of the product in the future. Does that make sense?
Listen, the first rule of show business is you have to get them into the tent,
Yeah, yeah. That's it. We got to get them into the tent,
and
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 that's
and then you can, if you've got a more complex reason for wanting them in the tent than the reason that they originally came in, and it's life affirming and positive. There's nothing wrong with that.
right, right.
You, you, when my mother, I still remember when I was being toilet trained, my mother, taking me in the kitchen and running my hands under, which is, I guess this is an old like trick of parents, just running the water in the kitchen sink and putting my hand in it, and somehow this still will happen to me occasionally if I really need to pee. If I turn on the faucet, all of a sudden I really need to pee. I mean, she was tricking me, into having the urge to go to the bathroom,
At the
but
right
for the right
time.
reason,
Right, for the right
so
reason.
I could learn to not go through the world, wearing a diaper my
Right,
entire life.
right, right.
It was a, it's, I think of it as just appealing to one of those members of the consortium whom you're not at that moment aware of.
Yes,
Um, and
yes.
but is part of the decision making process. And if you can get their attention, they have ways of getting the attention of other members of the consortium that you don't.
Right.
Um, and you'll a complex enough entity could 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 kind of like that machine that developed insights about chess could probably learn things about getting those kinds of dialogues going on even within an individual more productively, than we can, because
Well,
we're too
yeah.
close. It's
Right.
like being your own. It's like being your own lawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
You're too close to see patterns. I, and so does that answer what you asked?
Absolutely. That answers exactly what I asked, and it gave me insights into one, that I'm on a good path, but two, what just having the conversation pops ideas into my head about the interface design, because it has to feel comfortable. I mean, that's the most important thing, is that it has to feel somehow useful even when it's not yet useful. Um, or rather to say, it's not useful at the level that I hope it will someday be useful. It has to feel like right now there's a popular selling app on iPhones and Androids called Calm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all it does is it has different little tricks that it'll do to try to help you lower your blood pressure.
Mm.
It's basically a meditation aid, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, and it's very popular right now. Um, what we're trying to do is a little more sophisticated than that, because it has to react real time to a conversation. But it's essentially the same thing. It's if you want to make yourself more self aware, or to accomplish your dreams or your goals, you'll get there faster by having this interface around whenever you're talking to a group of people, right?
True.
And I don't feel like that's a lie, because it does increase self awareness, and self awareness increases the likelihood that you'll change yourself. But but it has to, so that the things that I want to focus on are half the science of understanding productive dialogue, and half just giving you that positive affirmation. That's what I'm that's what I'm thinking about. So,
Yeah, one of the things Deb and I have talked about a lot, and I just know that in my career was a big part of why I was able to succeed, given how many corporate rules I did not follow.
mm-hmm.
I, and it was, um, when I came around the corner into somebody's office, in general, they smiled. Because they it would there was I would the thought of having me the way the training program worked, it was a year long, and it was kind of like being rushed. At the end of the year, you were supposed to have found where you wanted to be and convinced them that they wanted you. And I'm positive that 90% of it, when you got, I'm certainly I was good at the work, and that was noticed.
Yeah, that
But
matters. But
a bigger part of it was, is this somebody I want to look at every day?
mm-hmm.
Is this somebody I want to have to talk to every day? Is
Mm-hmm.
this somebody, when I see their name on my call sheet, I'm going to go, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it pleasant to have them in the room?
Mm-hmm.
You know, did they make my day better? That time I told you about when I walked into a room full of vice presidents with their, you know, with their shoes off and a bottle of scotch on the table, and God asked what the hell I wanted and said, I'm just
Right.
here for a little informal brown nosing. I know I got more points in that moment than if I
Then.
had turned in the most brilliant analysis of what was wrong with a pilot, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that I possibly could.
Yeah.
It was an, oh, you're one of us moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and also it was a truth. It,
Right.
it was
Yeah.
it, it was it was something everybody knew was going on,
That just wasn't
and
being said out loud.
and
And then, yeah.
and, and to say it and say it unabashedly and unembarrassedly, I you know, as if it's even okay that that's what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it just clears the air.
Right. And
I,
yeah, so the best app would be one that eternally clears the air while making a minimal feedback loop operational.
well, no, there's a nice small ambition. Uh,
Right.
um, but yes, that would be so. So people, you know, those moments like the Raquel Welch moment, and with Tina Sinatra,
Sinatra. Yeah. Sinatra.
yeah,
Yeah.
they ultimately came down to my saying, I'm having trouble here and I need help,
Mm-hmm.
and the only person who can help me is you.
Yeah.
And here's the problem I have. And I even acknowledge that part of, you know, that the problem, I'm part of the organization. The problem exists in part because of the organization I'm part of.
Right.
But um, here's what's really going on my side of things.
Right.
And the only way I can think of to make them better is to tell you about them and and ask you to help get through this.
Right.
I, I can't order you to like me. I
Mm-hmm.
can't order you to think I'm on your side.
Right.
I have to let you make that decision. And the best way to do it is to be that I think I told you that I noticed that you used it in a title of one of the episodes, Through a Glass Darkly. That's
Yeah.
the paragraph which ends with, now I know in part, then I shall know even as I am known.
Right.
To me, those are the words in neon, the even as I am known. The way to get to know other people is to let them know you.
So,
And
so what Corvox needs to do is to let people know Corvox, which is why it's got to be more than just guessing how wrong he might be, it might be, but more about how it's learning. Something that gives them the an insight into what what Corvox is gaining, or what's changing in Corvox, or
human beings have a built-in nurturing um,
right function. Yeah.
function. I mean, and some of it's based on it was. I saw an article once. It was fascinating watching the evolution of the way in which Mickey Mouse was depicted from the very first. I think it was Steamboat Willie,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
till now, and he became infantilized along the way. He looked like a rat in the first one,
Right. And then he
and
became more like a
over
child.
time, his head got bigger, his eyes got bigger.
Mm-hmm.
He, you know, the proportions of body parts and especially of facial parts were those that you associate with a young child. And
Mm-hmm.
we have a built-in um, um, predisposition to protect a small child.
Right.
Um, and so if you can make it seem that it's like it's on your side,
Right.
uh, you know, and that it can't do it alone. It needs your help.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I,
It's on your
People are
side.
much more willing to cooperate, to participate when they feel like, even those silly green lines in my econ, you know, on my we
Yeah.
talked about. It's
Right.
just that it's like it's trying to do something and I can't do it without some assistance from me.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the thing it's trying to do is nothing,
Mm-hmm.
I still have a predisposition to try to help it do it.
Right. Right. And video game
So
designers think that way. They think about how to get people to want to make the light turn green, right? That's what, and but it's funny, they're so good at it, but they're only good at it in the context of designing their video games.
yeah,
And so I have a hard time getting them to make this jump, this shift, right? That you just described, right? It's very interesting. I don't know the answers, and we're not going to get to it today, but I just think
give
it's
me
an
one sec.
Yeah, sure. Let me check this ship. Contacts, authority, and power, and combat, and search and rescue. Okay. All right, so we need to find the place where everybody is going to mine something good. So let's just check. Let's get the keyboard and let's type in ELITEDANGEROUS mining locations near me, edmining.com. And then
Are we someplace selling stuff?
we already sold our stuff, and now we're going to go mining again, but we're going to do something different. We are on a website now called ED Mining, Elite Dangerous Mining, and what we want to do is we're going to find the place that everybody is going to mine, like the hottest mining place in town. And it looks like it looks like it's going to be HR 6944, I think. And it looks like monzonite is the hot product right now. Because that's worth $840,000 a chunk. So I think we're going to go to HR 6944, and that will give us the likelihood of encountering real players. Not that we're, we don't have to, but I just feel like having an encounter,
Well,
with
that's
somebody
fine.
real. Yeah. So
I'm probably actually going to sign off pretty soon.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just getting us set up to go there, and then I think we should sign off together, and we'll set that as the destination.
But I will say, Michael, as we get started each time, I think, what are we going to talk about? But it doesn't seem to be a problem.
Yeah, no, we always find our way.
And then I just, I passed and looked at the clock, and I thought, oh my God, it's almost 1:30.
Yeah.
And it's I will tell you, at least, and this again, this is because it's my construct, which I believe is very similar to Zeb's construct, which is why he works for me. But so much of what you talk about is exactly the technique of my experience of therapy in terms of learning to recognize my own inner dialogue and what was productive and what was not.
Mm-hmm.
Through an outside entity, which was another human being, but not who was telling me what I should think, was just examining all the ramifications of the things that I do think.
Mm-hmm.
And letting me come to my own decision about them. The Zeb's on the other side of town, and driving is the worst thing for me. And I had sort of, we'd been doing FaceTime, and we were going to do it again the next week. I said, this driving is getting too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And toward the end of the session, he said, um, what, he said, well, um, I sure hope you feel better, and I'll hope to see you next week.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a full day, but I wrote him back, and I said, you know, because we've reached this Gordian knot stage where therapist and friendship are inexorably intertwined, I can't untie them.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided to go in person, which is what I did this week. I said,
Mm-hmm.
it was ultimately the friendship side that tipped the scale. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like, even across, even though you're on the other side of town, I didn't like the look on your face, which was new. There was nothing obviously unsettled about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like how carefully you were being optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I picked up that you're really worried,
Yeah.
and that I don't like you being really worried about them.
Yeah.
And I fully understand why. And suddenly, the degree of discomfort of driving over there, and the degree of discomfort from knowing that if I didn't, he would be even more worried that I was retreating from life. It suddenly became, I didn't really have to think about it for very long. I thought, well, the one that's the least painful is the driving.
Right. Right. It just
Um,
changed the
and, and
dynamic. Yeah.
it was based on nothing specific that he said. It was just based on what I know about him and just what I picked up off of him, and the fact that I didn't like him being distressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I read somewhere, it was a great line. Someone wrote and says that, um, um, brains are relationship-seeking organisms. Bodies are the vehicles they use to go out and find another brain to connect with.
I like that.
And somehow, I think the success or failure of the kind of AI you're talking about, Corvox, will come down to, um, can it form a relationship with human beings? Um,
Yeah.
which might be very different, its perception of the relationship, if it has one, and the individual's perceptions, which all might be very different. But
Well,
there has to be some connection beyond utilitarian.
well, we know that chatbots and these in Japan, these digital girlfriends, um, they work. There's a huge number of people who feel they have real relationships with these bots. Unfortunately, the bots are only designed to have the relationship. They're not trying to understand something about productive dialogue, or you know what I
Right.
mean. And they are advancing very quickly. They're actually very sophisticated now, which is one of the reasons why I don't want Corvox to chat with you or to talk to you or to have a
Right.
cute little girl's face, or right. I don't want to be mixed up in that whole thing. But so I know that people can see a relationship with something. What I don't know is that if the people can feel they have a relationship with something that is contributing to a larger discussion, right? That because suddenly there's peer pressure or something, or there's judgment, or
Yeah, I don't know
you
that
know,
it even is, I don't know that it's even necessary for it to be part of a to
be part of a larger discussion.
for a
Yeah,
person to be aware of it. They only need to be aware of the fact that in some way they feel like they have a connection.
right,
Maybe that's a better word than relationship,
right,
because
right.
you're right. I mean, one of the things that's a tightrope always, even at this stage for Zeb and I, is it can't be just a friendship,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Doesn't
because
work. Yeah.
then you're suddenly, you're too close, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and but there's but there's a spectrum in between where you can feel that you have some sort of a you know, there's it's it's a meaningful connection to you in whatever that means to you. It doesn't have to mean it's like it's in a relationship with another human being.
Right.
I mean, people, would die when those, those little apps you had where if you didn't water your plant, it would die,
Right.
or
Right.
your puppy would,
The
people would be in tears.
the Tamaguchis or Tamagotchis. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, people would be in tears.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think that ultimately, and I think you're right. Having a chat, having a friendly relationship is not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
but but there I think it's something that would have to evolve that doesn't exist yet, and the only way for that to happen is to do it.
And to do it slowly because we can't
Well,
just
there's no way
get.
to do it fast because you don't know what you're trying to do.
Thank you. I've said that so many times to people and they don't get it when I say it. And you said it to me. Thank you so much, Larry. I feel really good.
If you knew what it was, you could just go do it and make a
Right.
bazillion dollars.
Right.
You know what it would like to be able to accomplish,
But you
but
don't
but
know
you don't
how to do it.
you
Yeah.
don't you don't know the path to get there yet. The
Right.
only way the only way you find out is to put one step in front of the other, and
Mm-hmm.
fall in a lot of holes and end up down a lot of blind alleys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a point when I was, I don't know, was some stuck point in therapy, and my vision of the universe is so changed to believing that, as I said, that there's this this infinite fractal, sort of like space, in which, um, things happen beyond our ken. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for the first and last time that I can remember in my lifetime, I opened a fortune cookie. And they often have, little homilies about, wisdom and such,
Mm-hmm.
or such or nothing. But this particular one said, "A ship in a harbor is safe, but that is not what ships were built for."
Oh, nice.
And I felt literally like I'd been tapped on the shoulder,
Yeah, that's a good one.
and been reminded that it happened to be that at that point, if I wanted to go further, I was going to have to take some risks. I was going to have
Mm-hmm.
to leave the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to listen to those.
Well,
I,
and I'm constantly struck, Larry, by how how familiar the journey you describe sounds to me.
wow.
Even though there are such huge differences in the journey that one would be tempted to say, "Oh, there's nothing," right? I mean, not,
Yeah.
but it sounds so familiar to my journey of these past 10 years, and I don't know why I say that, and I maybe sometime we'll dive into it, but it just feels familiar, and it feels like something I struggle with every day, um, even though I'm doing this project and and all of this stuff. I'm a long way from where I want to be, right? And that has a lot to do with leaving the harbor, and like you said. And so when you say those words, I feel like I'm being tapped on the shoulder, and
Maybe you
it's
are.
good. Yeah. So.
Um, you know, it was when my last good friend here, Dan Berkowitz, died, and within 3 months you placed a call to me. Maybe it was less than 3 months. Um, I was very happy about the whole thing, but after, in the days in between, I thought, I don't think this is an accident.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's the next step, and and it was presented to me as an option, and, um, you got to it however you got to it, and I've learned, I don't have to know I don't have to know what the end goal is. I just have to know that it feels like it is meant, it is, it's what's next.
Right.
And that's all I need to know. I don't, that it's not harmful to me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'll find out what it is. The only way to find out what it will be for me is to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that but that when truly unexpected things happen in unexpected ways, I, that they're, it's worth really spending some time thinking about them, because just because, and I don't mean to decide whether to do them or not do them, but to just observe that 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 an opportunity has been shown to you, which, if you think about it, is very unlikely, but there it was.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe.
and you know what's funny from my end is when I first came up with this idea, because I had been working on all these different ways to try to make the not the show happen, but the idea happen. And I realized that I was forcing myself to do a lot of things that just didn't feel comfortable. That went against my grain. And I started playing this game to relax, uh, and then I realized that talking while playing this game would be not only possible but pleasurable. And yours was the first name that popped into my head.
Huh.
And I hadn't called you in like forever, like in a long
Yeah.
time. But I said, Larry would get this, I think. And it wasn't like I had a long list, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just weird that it just, and I didn't even know for sure that I wanted to do the show. I wasn't even, I just was sort of like, well, it would work because it would be comfortable and yet always moving forward. That to me felt like a better way to be than the way I had been, which was trying to act like I was some kind of startup CEO or something that I'm not. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. If you're doing something, and there's something in you that just tells you that, you're not doing it, you're doing it because it's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, my landscaper, who's remained a very good friend, has a guy who occasionally would work for him, named George, and George and Wanda are just, I don't, they're I, they live the simplest life possible. I mean, she drove a banana delivery truck, and somehow got in a fight and then lost that job. And George is so like freeway phobic, it takes him forever to get. But they're very nice, very kind people. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was his mother died and left them like $800,000,
Mm-hmm.
and which, for the way they live, and the age that they are, which is somewhere in their, I think, early 60s. If they could put it in CDs, and they have no children and no spouses and nobody dependent on them, and they would die with money left over because their needs are so simple.
Right.
And
They've acclimated to a lifestyle that they can more than afford. Right.
and Buck said, I know this is weird, but would you talk to George about investing? Because I think he's getting a lot of really bad advice, which he was. And much to my amazement, they actually came to my house because George, and the first thing I said was, I said, George, are you thinking about all this investing because you want to, or because you think you're supposed to? And he said, because I think I'm supposed to. And I said, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks when once you've got a big pile of money, that it's just a natural. The next step is you try and make that pile bigger.
Right.
But why? In your
Right.
case, you
Right.
have everything. The things that you like are not expensive.
Right.
You could, if it was safe, you could put it all under your bed and just spend it, and there'd still be a big pile left when you die.
Right.
So if it stresses you out that deciding these kinds of investments, just put it in CDs.
Right.
and just make sure that there's, no, they're only the insurable amount in any one bank, and don't worry about it.
Right.
You know, but it was that key question was, are you here? Are you trying to figure out, learn how to do this because you want to know how to do it, or because you think you're supposed to want to know how to do it?
And when I started to try to figure out how to make this show work, uh, I instantly knew that I was doing something that I wanted to do, because I could spend hours fiddling with the camera and getting the green screen to work, or the feeds, and I didn't care. The time just disappeared.
Right, which is a
Right.
good sign.
Right. And that I loved that. Like even
Well,
now, while we're talking, I'm figuring out how to do slow pans, right, and
well, there
create
you go.
drama effects. Not
Look at
because
that.
not because I'm. Oh, see, that was bad. See, jerky camera, but because I just wanted to, because I enjoy it. I love creating a little bit
Well,
of story.
I am flattered beyond words that I popped into your head, and I'm grateful.
Uh, and I do hope you feel better. I mean, really, really do.
I do too.
I know it's a long journey. I know it's not going to happen like instantaneously, but I'm still going to wish it every day.
No, I like that. I mean, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Other people being concerned. I've sort of gotten over the. Don't ask me how I am, okay?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I understand people. They're doing what they know how to do. They're trying to let you know that they care.
Right.
I have said to a few friends, it's easier for me if you say, "How's your day going?" rather than,
Mm-hmm.
"Are you feeling better?"
Right.
But 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 I've learned to value the intent, and I mean, there was a point in my life, Michael, when people would give me gifts, and I would open the gift and look at it, and these would be decent friends, and I would say, "What is it that you know about me that made you think that I would want this?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really mean. Um, and it never occurred to me at the time it was mean. Usually, those were people that eventually stopped giving me gifts.
It's a
And
learned behavior. Don't give Gary a gift. Listen.
and I've also only recently learned sometimes, I have a lot of friends who have less money than I do. And it's always just been my nature. For the longest time, it was on an expense account. We go out to eat, I would pay.
Mm-hmm.
There's some friends I have now who, are, they just scrape by. But once in a while, they'll want to, back when I could do it, just to go to IHOP for breakfast, and they want to pay. And I would always go, no, 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 let me do it. And then thinking I'm being a good guy.
Right. But
And
you're
it
actually
took
you're
it took
denying them their right
forever,
to. Yeah.
took forever for me to finally, and Zeb just loved this when I did sink in, that they were trying to give me a gift, and I was saying, no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking away from them an opportunity that meant something to them, because I had decided what I thought was best for them,
Right.
when they were telling me what was best for them, and I wasn't listening.
Wow.
And that sometimes it wasn't about that I could afford it more than they could. It was about a way of showing it was meaningful for them,
Right.
and meaningful for me too. That they wanted to share something.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
And,
but for the longest,
yeah.
it took me a long time to realize that I, to listen. It's a little bit like that thing about your guilt is nourishment enough.
Mm-hmm.
That don't that that, let people just listen. And my hope always in conversations, not just with you in this, but sometimes in emails with other people about other stuff, isn't to end up telling somebody what to do, but sometimes just in sharing my own experiences and my own conclusions I've come to about how things work for me. They might come to an entirely different conclusion about what will work for them, but it might just get them thinking,
Right.
about something that they. I mean, and I know in some of this I picked up from from I, the good side of my parents. My mother, I remember when I was very small, telling me she didn't buy cookbooks for recipes. She bought cookbooks for ideas. And if in an entire cookbook there was one idea that she could adapt and use in her own cooking, she considered it money well spent.
I like that.
Um,
Hey, that reminds me. I am actually uh, interested in Zeb's reaction to some of this. Now, I don't know how that would be appropriate, just because it either comes up in your conversation with him or it doesn't. But I really appreciated it when you passed along those questions, and I just, I don't know. I just wanted to add that at the end of our call today, just to
oh no,
acknowledge.
no, we talked
To
about it a lot.
acknowledge. Yeah.
But it's a big part, and he's excited. He finds the whole thing exciting.
Well,
I,
well,
I
I think
mean,
that, yeah.
he's the one who sent me a thing saying there's this book that I think maybe First Mate Alcock would be interested in reading. And there it is. And anything that he ever says that I think is worth passing along, you'll hear. I mean, there's nothing sacrosanct
About this conversation connecting. That's good. Good.
about I'm free to. I mean, other than things about him personally, which
Oh
I
yeah.
might know,
No.
of
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
there are very few.
Right.
That I'm free to, and I'm free to talk about anything that happens in a session, because it's the privacy question is whether I want privacy. And no, he enjoys it, and it sparks better conversation with us, and he has a very deep mind that thinks about a lot of this stuff um, very deeply. The day that I said to him, I know this is going to sound weird, but I think that love is an actual thing. I think it is sort of the bright version of dark matter. And the reason that I've come to this conclusion is the little I know about quantum mechanics. And he said, gee, that's just what I think.
Ah, I love it.
And I thought, because I was sure I'd get an mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because I thought,
That's
I know this,
that's
I
very
know
interesting.
absolutely nuts. But when I found out how subatomic particles can be ensnared, I thought, oh, okay,
Well, yeah.
there is a whole other thing going on
Mm-hmm.
that is not explained by Newton's laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if that's possible with those, why isn't it possible with with the energy portion of human beings, which people struggle to put into words and images, which are like what they know, which doesn't work because it isn't something we know.
Well, and what's interesting, love or otherwise, if information is never lost, and every entanglement we have is never lost, it means that we are always participating in a cosmic dialogue.
It's true.
That's
I guess that's another way of saying that thing about what I said about being tapped on the shoulder.
mm-hmm.
I feel sometimes like the 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 veil between the other and here briefly is thinner or opens unless you catch a glimpse of something.
There's something about this part of the conversation that really could help with the positioning of Korvax, because if you use the universe as your backdrop, as we do in this game, you can accomplish all those friendly things, but because the scope is so much bigger, it's allowed to be a journey. I don't know. There's something there. I got to.
No, I know what you're saying. Right.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a. Yeah. It's not. It's less threatening. You're part of a larger whole, and
Mm-hmm.
and as you say, it makes it more of a journey.
Oh, that poor guy that just left the station is getting blown up. That's too bad. All right.
Or is that with us getting blown up or somebody
No,
else?
somebody else. We're safe.
Oh, that's so
Commander Strikeman, thank you again for an amazing journey today. Appreciate it. This has been terrific.
I
We're
think,
closing.
and,
Close.
we'll probably talk during the week, and I'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week. Take care.
Over, out, bye.
Over now. Bye. I gotta hit all the buttons.